This video is sponsored by Surfshark.
My company of Green Howards was one of the assault companies on D-Day. We had to take a coastal gun battery at Montfleury. I was in charge of a group of 2-inch mortars laying down smoke, but I noticed that 2 of our platoons running up to attack the guns had gone past a pillbox. I went along with my company commander, one of the bravest men I know. They fired at us, but once we were on top of the box, grenades and stem gun killed some of them, and when I went down inside with my stem gun, I got half a dozen prisoners.
Company Sergeant Major Stanley Hollis of the 6th Battalion, the Green Howards. This is his story in his own words. So on the 6th of June 1944, under the command of General Eisenhower, the Allies broke into Europe. The US landing at Utah and Omaha beaches, the British landing at Gold and Sword, with the Canadians at Juneau. Our story took place at Gold Beach. Now this is Gold Beach King Sector, and with this aerial photography we can see the bunker location which was assaulted by Stan Hollis on D-Day, as well as the gun position at Montfleury which they were ordered to seize. We will also look at this bigger map for reference, but our first location is the landing site on Gold Beach. Now this is Gold Beach King Sector, and this is where the 6th Battalion, the Green Howards, landed in the assault wave on D-Day. Now I've overlaid some original footage of the Tyne and Tees Division landing in the same location, coming ashore right after the assault wave. Unless for the stone groins that you can see, the coastal erosion measures, the beach is pretty much unchanged from 1944. It's probably the beach with the fewest changes, where you can see how it actually appeared on D-Day. Now, as we look across to the eastern end of the beach here, you can see just off in the distance there, I'll try and zoom in, there is a concrete emplacement with the seaward facing arm protecting it from naval gunfire and the embrasure pointing towards us. Now that gun position is facing us, so any landing craft and any armoured vehicles that came ashore right here would have been under fire from that position. That position was responsible for knocking out a number of tanks and landing craft that came ashore right here. Now this beach and this particular sector is quite famous because it is where Stanley Hollis came ashore. Now Stanley Hollis is just one man within thousands that landed here on D-Day, but we're going to use Stanley Hollis as an example because we can actually trace where he landed, where he fought through, and which road he used to get off this beach. So follow me now as we retrace the route for Stanley Hollis. Upon landing on the shores of France, Stan Hollis attacked what he thought was a machine gun position. So let's take a look at that position today. So Stanley Hollis says that he saw a stripped down Lewis gun on the deck of his landing craft, and he decided to put it into use by using a full pan of ammunition to fire at what he believed was a pillbox. And when I show you the footage, you can see that this is one of the few buildings that were actually on this site at the time. So from a landing craft, you may well think that this building, this stone structure, is a pillbox. So a full magazine of ammunition was fired into this structure. Turns out it was just basically a station for a local small gauge railway or tram system, Victorian era, that was here, which ran along the road that you can see here. Now, hopefully you can see the change in the topography and the terrain by looking at this footage, and sometimes the light distorts it slightly. Hopefully you can see that those houses are much higher than where I am now. And that is the same ridgeline that covers Omaha Beach, essentially. It's just much more gradual. There's a slope rather than a bluff or a cliff like there is at Omaha Beach. But it's the same height difference, really. And it was here that Stanley Hollis charged up this road towards enemy positions, which effectively were lining the forward edge of where those houses are. Those houses, of course, weren't there in 1944, but they've been built on a similar sort of position. I travel all over the world to film these historic locations and share the amazing stories of bravery from World War II with you. And with all the travel involved, it is essential I use a quality VPN brand to protect my data and the information I keep on my personal devices. A Surfshark VPN, the sponsor of today's video, encrypts your online data and helps to secure your personal information when you use free public Wi-Fi. I also want to keep up to date with my favorite programming from home, but sometimes these shows aren't available when I travel abroad, and therefore it is essential to have a VPN to swap the real location of my device with a new one, aka changing your IP address. Surfshark has over 3,200 servers in 100 countries, allowing you to access and unblock content libraries and streaming services from other countries, like all of the Netflix libraries. If any of this sounds like something you might be interested in, go to surfshark.com/History Explorer, or just click on the link in the description below for 4 extra months of Surfshark at an unbeatable price.
I noticed that 2 of our platoons running up to attack the guns had gone past a pillbox. This was only about a foot above the ground, but I spotted a Spandau machine gun in the firing slit.
Now keep a lookout for this peculiarly shaped house, which you will see appear again very soon. Now, if we overlay the images I'm showing you now with the footage from the 50th TNTs as they approach off the beach, headed up this road and beyond, you can see that it's still really open here, but there is far more in the way of shrubbery, trees, woodland, etc. And you can see just about where the line of that field boundary is, that's where the anti-tank ditch was, and they saw the locals probably around about here, those locals that they chatted to. Now remember that house? Well, this is it on the bigger map, and here it is today. The house that you can see in the footage is in fact this house. And this is the one with the circular shaped driveway on the aerial footage. The driveway doesn't necessarily exist anymore, but this is the house you can see in that video footage. And it sticks out like a sore thumb clearly on the footage because you can see it. But today there is this big wall here which protects it from being seen. So I'm just looking from the roadway, which I'm allowed to do. I'm not on their property. And it's interesting to think that this is a witness to that act by Stanley Hollis. People, if they were in that building, would have seen Stanley Hollis run up this road, run down this direction towards the bunkers and the German defences. Now, of course, none of these houses were here; these were all new. But this is essentially where those acts were taking place. I think it's brilliant. Let's now look at the bunker location where it's believed Stanley Hollis assaulted, and he tells us what happened next.
I went along with my company commander, one of the bravest men I know. They fired at us, but once we were on top of the box, grenades and stem gun killed some of them, and when I went down inside with my stem gun, I got half a dozen prisoners. It was a big place, 2 stories deep, and we got all the equipment intact, so that made things just a little safer for the rest of our company in their attack.
Now, the observation bunker is just up here, and this is where Stanley Hollis jumped on top, threw a grenade through the slit, and cleared the position. And it's right here. This mound that you can see. This is it. Stanley Hollis stood on top of that and threw a grenade inside, fired his Sten gun through the embrasure, but it was where these houses were, is where he came across. Now, those houses, of course, weren't here at the time. I don't think you can get in here anymore, but you might be able to see inside still. Oh, the cat comes to say hello. Hello. We've got our observation post with feline friend, and that is the view they would have had. So they would have been able to coordinate the fires onto the beach easily on D-Day. And Stanley Hollis is the one who cleared this position. So we're in the footsteps of Stanley Hollis today, and we're coming up to the location where he achieved his second feat of heroism on D-Day, and this is in Crepon. The first act, of course, as you've just seen, was down just off Gold Beach near Montfleury. And now we're into Crepon.
The fighting all through D-Day was fairly warm, but one piece of trouble we ran into was on account of some dogs I noticed at the end of a country lane. There was nobody there, but the dogs were wagging their tails. When I went along with the Major, we found a German field gun supported by machine guns in a farmyard. Elements of D Company attacked from some farm buildings, but every time our lads got up on the next wall, they were knocked out by machine guns. I tried to get the gun crew with a mortar, but they started blazing away with a gun at 100 yards, open sights, and big stones were flying all over. The gun concentrated on one of our Bren groups, and things looked bad for them. They couldn't get back. So I tried again with a Bren, and this time the Boche got so worried, they left our lads alone, and we all got back safely. The field gun was taken later.
Now, every time I've come to Normandy, I've never been able to get into this orchard. The owner's either been out or I haven't been able to stop by because of time constraints with other filming commitments I've had. But on this occasion, the owner was in, and all I had to do was knock on the door, and they knew exactly what I was after. So it's right at the end of this orchard, just in that tree line that you can see beyond the fence, is where a gun was located. And that gun was pointing in the other direction initially, and that is why Stanley Hollis tried to engage them. But as he came around the corner, he saw two dogs, and the dogs' tails were wagging, indicating that they were probably near people. And sure enough, a shot rang out from this location and struck the wall behind Stanley Hollis, which is just behind me. He was just over here by that farm building. Now, that indicated to him clearly that there were likely enemy present. That is when he decided to get two Brens to come along with him. They were laying down suppressive fire as he crawled along the left-hand side of this orchard here, in what was at the time a rhubarb patch. This was all like allotments, if you like. There was a rhubarb patch along here, and he crawled along the side up towards the gun position, and he fired a Piat, and unfortunately that Piat landed just short. It's got quite a parabolic shot because it's a spring-loaded projectile. It landed short and didn't knock out the gun. And what it meant for Stanley is that the gun knew that he was there and began to turn towards him. It actually began to face him, but they couldn't depress the gun enough so that the gun would engage him. It actually engaged over his head and struck into one of the walls here. It probably struck over there into that farm building. Stanley then extracted from this location, but what he didn't realise is that he left two men behind here. And so then he had to go back and recover them. So the way that he recovered them and ensured their withdrawal was to go in with a Bren gun, firing from the hips, suppressing that enemy position, allowing the Allied soldiers to extract with him. Absolutely astounding, really, and it's amazing that I've got to come in here and be allowed access. It's brilliant.
Some days later, we had the hardest fighting the battalion has ever seen in the whole war. We had heavy losses. There again, another farmhouse held us up. Again, I was lucky with a STEN gun. From 15 yards this time. It knocked out all the Boche except one who came out of a trench, and I got him too. So we pushed on into France. Now these don't sound like VC affairs, and I don't know if they really are. I do know it was the sort of thing that was happening all over in the first 5 days in Normandy, And jumping into a pillbox full of Germans wasn't so wonderful when you saw your own lads fighting like heroes on every side of you. And when you saw lads you knew dropping dead, you wanted to do something to smash the guns that had done it. Just after we were out of the water on D-Day, I saw one lad go down, wounded. Now he saved my life in Sicily, and he comes from Middlesbrough too. That sort of thing makes you forget to be scared. I've always been scared when we've run into action. With the BEF at Dunkirk, I'll remain to Sicily. But if your lads see the Sergeant Major's got his head down, well, it's a bad do, isn't it? So that's the way it goes. And things like snipers' bullets on your cheek, and being blown out of trenches, and looking into German gun muzzles, they don't count as much as you'd think when you've got men like that round you. I'd like them to know that their telegram was the first I got about the VC. I've sometimes heard that chaps who get medals inspire the other men. It wasn't like that in my case. My officers and men, they inspired me.
What a fitting memorial to Stanley Hollis and to the Green Howards behind me. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, I've got many more like it from Normandy, and I've put some links to them right above so you can check them out. Until next time. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring the video. Don't forget to click the link in the description to get an amazing discount.